N.C. Gibbons writes, I have some 3x4 wood veneer cards in my stash, but I'm struggling to make them work on a page. I know I could just slot them into a 3x4 pocket on a divided page protector, but I really want it to work in 12x12. However, every time I try to incorporate it into my design, it just looks like I've stuck a plank of wood on the page. Has anybody else had success in veneer? Glitter Girl, can you help N.C. Gibbons put plank to paper?
Of course I can. For today's adventure, I'm going to start with these 7 different wood veneer pieces from Two Peas in a Bucket. These are exclusive to Two Peas. They come in a variety of different motifs and styles in 2 different sizes, 3x4 and 2x2. So they are etched wood veneer. It's really lightweight and can go into a pocket in a pocketed page protector or glued easily to a 12x12 page. And what I've done is made a list of different techniques that I could try in order to see how the wood veneer takes different medium and see how the finish looks with all those different varieties. But I haven't tried them in advance. I'm going to try them and share with you. We can see what works and what we should all avoid and maybe not try again. So I have 7 different cards. I'm going to try 7 different techniques, and then I'm going to pick at least one of them, and use it on a 12x12 page to finish today's adventure. I figured it makes sense to start with something really simple, so I'm going to try stamping a word underneath the camera on this card, just using normal black ink. This is a Memento ink pad, but there are a variety of different quick drying black ink pads out there. And this is one of the phrase stamps on the Nailed It stamp sheet. So I'm going to try to center that underneath the camera. And we'll see how that dries. It doesn't appear, well, it's not completely perfect, and I'll be honest that I was a little worried that it might bleed, so I didn't press too hard, and that does mean that some of the texture of the wood grain comes through. It does, as it's drying, it is soaking into the wood grain a little bit and expanding, but it doesn't seem to be so dramatic that you can't read it. So let's see how that goes on your measurement. If you like your stamping to be absolutely perfect, maybe not, but certainly legible, and I think I would probably accept that and use it without any trouble. And I might use, since I've stamped in black, I might use that with some black ink around the edge, and then on a page where I have some other black detailing to the embellishment, because the black on the wood grain is quite a high contrast. Some cards, it seemed to me, would look nice with an all-over color, so I didn't want to make it too dark with this wood grain pattern, because then I was worried that it would just look like a rectangle and you would lose the pattern. So I thought maybe the idea of a wash would be better, so I'm going to try using my Distress ink in a brown shade. This is walnut stain, but just any brown. And I'm watering it down, so I just have a cup of water, adding that, and then I'm going to use that as a wash with a paintbrush. Now, what I need to do is try this quickly on a bit of scrap paper to make sure it's not super dark, because I always find in the cup of water it's difficult to tell how dark it is. Okay, so on the paper you can tell it's not exceptionally dark, but in the cup it looks like really strong coffee. So I was just checking that to make sure. And then always better to start with a color that looks quite pale and then build up the color, because obviously you can't take it away, but I can add more if I want the color to be more saturated. So just water and a bit of ink from a re-inker, but I think you could use mist or anything like that, or even watercolor. You just want a wash of something. Okay, so you can see that the wood grain takes the color, but you do lose the pattern a little bit. I have an idea for what might work with that. But I think what I want to do is make sure this is nice and dry before I start that next step. So I'll let it dry for a minute and and then come back. Oh, a word about this curling. Wood veneer will curl when you get it wet, especially when it's a thin sheet like this, but it's very flexible, so don't panic. It will flatten right back out. And if it's still a bit curled when you go to put it on a 12 by 12 page, in a pocketed page protector, if it's in a 3 by 4 pocket, it won't give you any trouble at all because the pocket is going to make it flatten out, most likely. If it does give you any trouble or you want to put it on a 12 by 12 page and your normal adhesive isn't working, just take super sticky double-sided tape and do a box all the way around the edge and an X in the middle, and it will flatten out because it's really lightweight, it's really flexible. It's just that wood veneer will naturally go back sort of to the shape of the outside of the tree, so it's going to round naturally. But I'll let it dry and then see if I can do something to bring up this pattern from the background. For this next step, I'm going to whitewash over the top of this, and I'm just going to use some white gesso, but you could use white acrylic paint or any color of acrylic paint that you want to wash over the top. And my intention is that I'm going to leave a layer of the paint on the top surface, but not the engraved surface. So I want to paint it on quite light so that I'm not getting lots of paint in the grooves. And then before it has time to dry, come back with something to scrape it off the paint. Is this perfect? No. And in fact, now I think it's quite muddy in color, so let's keep going. Let's see what happens if I just add more. I may have ruined this one for good. Well, I can certainly get the other effect. So maybe my better idea would be to use a brown paint so that I get a dark line for the pattern rather than trying to do white, because I think it's going to be pretty impossible to keep the white out of the engraving bit unless I go back and painstakingly paint in with a tiny little brush. So let me see if I can find some dark paint and try that. I found two more to try, a just general brown acrylic paint, and then a gold Lumiere, which is a kind of an artist's acrylic, but not a fancy artist's acrylic, just nicer quality than a plain old craft acrylic, if that makes sense. And let's try that same idea with the dark brown. And I do think that is an improvement. Now, I didn't do the white over the whole card, so this side still has that original shading that I added with the Distress Ink wash. I'll go ahead and paint over the rest. I think the Distress Ink wash on its own looks like that would have been one idea, and you can see the pattern. It's just not as obvious perhaps as on the original card. You can definitely tell that as I'm adding the paint, the card is picking up the pigment of the paint. Now you can start to tell here the difference in the three different differences here, where you can see this is the brown paint on top of the white gesso, and although the white gesso on its own looked a bit of a mistake to me, I do quite like the color tone I've been able to get versus this is just the paint on top of the wash on the card, and you can see where the texture's not as smooth. The wood veneer is a bit more rough. I think I prefer it on top of the white gesso. And then I have a quick little attempt with the gold. This card's going to end up looking a mess. I'll try and do something later to salvage it because it's a really pretty design, but sometimes that happens in trying to see what will work. But you know, now that I've messed up this card, then you can see what you like and you don't have to worry so much. So this was the sparkly gold paint, and it does have a little bit of a shimmer, but not anything that's bold, even not like a glimmer mist, or certainly not the Heidi Swapp color shine. So that is lots of different paint on the card, and that original idea of a distress ink wash. Moving on, let's try something different. And using that gold paint made me think about the gold mist. So let's see how shimmery the Heidi Swap Gold Lame Color Shine is on the wood veneer. And I'll leave that to dry and bring it back to the camera in just a moment when it's done, so that you don't have to sit there and watch paint dry. But it is soaking in pretty quickly. It's just one little droplet left on there already. Everything else is soaked in, and it has a really nice shimmer actually. So yeah, I think I really recommend that. But if we know that we can get a metallic shine from spraying a mist on top of the wood veneer, my next question would be, can we do it with embossing powder? And I'm actually just going to do a colored embossing powder rather than a metallic today, but the same rules apply. I'm going to use some Versamark ink, and on this one I'm just going to do the edges. So just like I'm inking the edge of a bit of paper, I'm going to ink the edges of the card itself. Now you can see that a bit of color is coming up on the wood grain there, and that is not the Versamark itself. It is the fact that my Versamark is shamefully stained from another project. So please just ignore that bit of color. I'm going to cover it up with some green embossing powder anyway, so that's why it doesn't particularly bother me that my Versamark is stained, because it still works just fine. But if I wanted to do clear embossing powder, then I want to make sure that I'm using one that's nice and clean. You're going to be really safe and use tweezers to hold that if it blows away from the heat gun. You're not going to get your fingers all burnt. Sorry about that. And what I was trying to do is I was worried that the wood veneer would scorch or warp a lot. It has warped up a little bit, but it'll flatten right back out, you can see. But it doesn't seem to have been overly sensitive. It didn't scorch, and I did have to get relatively close, and the wood is certainly heated up. But that's the finished look with just the ink around the edges. I quite like that finish, and I like using embossing powder on the edges where you'll get those teeny tiny little dots of embossing powder around the edge. And when you're embossing an image, that's a nightmare because it always destroys the perfectness of your stamped image, and it's something we always try to avoid. But if you're inking edges, I think it's really nice because it gives you a nice natural fade, so it's not nearly so stressful trying to get rid of every tiny little fleck of embossing powder that's gone astray. I really like that finish. It has a little bit of shine to the enamel of the embossing powder, and a good contrast on the color, and it wasn't difficult at all. It didn't scorch, didn't take it out of shape or anything like that. So I recommend that one as a good thing to try. With the next card, I wanted to take that last idea and put it together with the first idea we tried, which was stamping. So I want to use a simple background stamp. This is just a polka dot background, and use Versamark and some aqua embossing powder to make the background of this card still wood grain, but with a nice polka dotted finish over the top. I think that should work well based on what we've seen from the other two. And this will give us a nice comparison. So you've got the embossed ink, which sits on top of the card, versus that first bit of stamping I did where the ink is actually sinking into the card. So in theory, I think this one should come out a bit cleaner and with a nice clean stamping design than the words, which did fade in a little bit. Obviously, you can use a block too with stamping on the wood veneer. With background stamps, I just find I do better getting pressure all the way across to the middle of the stamp with a brayer and no block, but definitely try to see what works best for you. So I have polka dots there, and just turn this over so I don't get embossing powder on this bit. Both the embossing powders I'm using today are the Zing embossing powders from American Crafts. Come in all sorts of different colors, and of course colors that will coordinate with American Crafts paper collections, but they're always good colors to use with all sorts of different papers. You don't have to worry too much about that. Okay, so that's looking pretty tidy. And there we go, all different polka dots embossed on there. I will say that it did seem, this part here where it's very small and cut out is obviously a bit more fragile than the card itself, and I did get one little crack here, but it's not gone all the way through. It's just a tiny crack on the surface there where wood grain has those natural little divides. It's just kind of emphasized one there, but that's not going to be any problem once I put some adhesive on the back. Look, you can even see it once it's flat on the page. And I think, yes, this bit of stamping is cleaner than what's here. It's not completely perfect, and with embossing of polka dots, I'm not really looking for perfection. I was just looking for a nice happy pattern with the color that I wanted to add, and I'm pretty happy with that. For a little something different, instead of just adding things to the top, I thought, what if you wanted this but in a circle instead of a square? So I'm going to try just a normal simple circle on a manual die cutter, just using some washi tape to tack it in place so it doesn't move while I put it through the die cutter. Now there may be a better, an ideal platform configuration for wood veneer, but what I did was just keep it on the same set of platforms that I normally use with cardstock and pattern paper, and just ran it through a couple times. It didn't come out with a clean cut the first time through, so the washi tape's helpful to make sure that your multiple cuts stay exactly the same place. And so I'm just punching this out while keeping the washi tape there so that I've got less chance of any splintering. And then I can take the washi tape off. Now, of course, because it's been through the die cutter a few times now, that tape is going to be stuck pretty fast. But it's fine. And in fact, it has even given it that nice little embossed edge around the outside of the circle from putting it through, I think I did 3 passes, one on its own and then one forward and backward, and so it went through the rollers 3 times, and that gave me a nice even cut around the edge with the embossed outside line. So that worked really well, no splintering there. I don't know how well, and I don't have a lot of extra pieces to try, I don't know how well it would work with more intricate shapes than a plain circle. For example, like the pinked circle with all those zigzag lines, I think I would want a spare to check before I used my absolute favorite piece of wood veneer. I will say that the frame on this circle could also be a nice piece on its own, so certainly no waste there. I can use both of those on a layout, and I think they'll look quite cute together. One last card, so I'm going to give one last thing a shot, and that's a gelato with, it comes with a little stipple brush. It's stained yellow because I've used it, but you can see that there's no, well, there's only the teeniest bit of yellow coming through, so I think I'm good to give this a try with the aqua. And then just stipple it on. I don't know how well this will go on with the brush. Not particularly well at all. Can try adding it directly, just coloring it on. And then brushing off the extra. Can use it as a mask, but that seems a bit of a waste of the pretty wood veneer, unless it was the color you were going to paint it anyway. So there you can see how that looks. I don't think that's my favorite of the techniques, but I think it would really vary on what color you use. So the color of the wood veneer itself is going to combine with the color of the gelato, because the gelato is more like a sheer color. Let's see if I can get off the extra aqua. I don't have a brown gelato, but I have gray. Let me try a little section in gray and see if that's a bit more pleasing color. I've got a huge amount of excess there that I don't need. If I can bring that over to a section where you can see it against the white. I haven't got that perfectly clean yet. But I do think I like the gray a lot better than the aqua. So I think the darker colors and the more neutral colors will work well. But of course then I'm losing the fact that it's a wood grain. It, however, does have the nice design. It has the dimension up off the page. So as long as you're happy to have those aspects, I think actually the gelatos could work really well. I would just say that it does look like you need to, if you want full color, you're going to need to apply it directly or with a lot of layers like this, because that is brushed on. You can certainly see a difference between the brushed on gray and the directly applied gray. But then when it's directly applied, I'm going to get all that kind of extra, and I just need to go back I also use a fine paintbrush, sorry, to go back and remove those extra bits from the corners. And then you've got a different look there as well. So with the darker colors in the Gelatos range, I think that's a really nice option. And you could certainly do the whole frame, but the technique's not going to change for the whole thing, so I won't make you watch all of that. So let's line them all up, and I'll let you see all those different techniques together, and then I'm going to choose some for a layout. So here's stamping with normal fast drying dye ink, stamping and then embossing, and using the same ink, the Versamark around the edge and embossing powder around the edge, die cutting, gelatos, and then there's the two with the more wet medium, and they have curled a lot, so I can't really lay them out flat without showing them. So this was the variety of different acrylic paints and the distress wash over the wood grain to darken the color. And this is the Gold Mist, the Color Shine Gold Lame. Really nice shimmer, but the wet medium will make the veneer curl up. It's really flexible, so it's going to adhere fine. It just means that I probably wouldn't want to make these in advance. I'd want to use them on a layout straight away, because obviously in my stash they're not very easy to store all curled up like that, so it would be good to just get them glued down to something sooner rather than later. I actually might try on one like this, just running it through the sewing machine. I've run the thicker wood veneers through my sewing machine without any problem, as long as I wouldn't use that needle again on fabric, especially because it will blunt the needle. But I didn't have any problems with my machine going through the wood veneer, because it's quite soft. Not a problem. It's certainly softer than some of the fabric I put through the machine, so that's okay. And you can definitely add a few other things. I've run out of cards to try, but you could add, if you just want a layer of gloss over the top, you could do it with either a clear embossing powder or use something like glossy accents or diamond glaze and let it just dry overnight, so you get that nice thick layer of enamel over the top. And you can certainly add some sparkle with glitter glue. Again, you'd need to let it dry, but it will certainly adhere to the wood without any trouble, so you can make it sparkly. And I think that leads me to today's layout. Now my plan is to go through a pretty quick layout using the polka dotted Hello wood veneer card from the first section, and then I'll take you through what else I'm using. After last week's video with the 3 pictures in a row, I was printing out some other images and realized I have some that just weren't particularly amazing images on their own. Maybe they're a bit blurry and they didn't look great at a larger size, but they were still images I wanted to include. And bringing them down smaller and including them in a little strip of 3 or 4 images seem to be working really well. So maybe that's just a little phase I'm going through, but second week in a row I'm going to use a strip of 3, but this time it's the exact same frame, just repeated 3 times because I only have 1 image. I'm using 1 sheet of pattern paper from the Amy Tangerine Cut and Paste collection, and then on a background of polka dots from the Pebbles Basics collection. And those papers are really great for background if you like frames around the edge. So now I can have that aqua polka dot that I added to the wood veneer will repeat around the edge of the finished layout. And then to that I'm using stickers and die cuts today from the Dear Lizzie Polka Dot Party collection, which is new from American Crafts. So these are 4 die cuts that I picked out that I think I'll use, but I reserve the right to change my mind, and I'll give you just a little look at what else comes in that pack. There's number 1, 2, and 3 there. And lots of aqua, some chalkboard, also some blue and a little bit of pink. Sorry if I'm rushing through this too fast. Most of the wording's pretty simple in this pack, so it should be stuff that can be adapted to all different types of pages. And I think I'm going to use these stickers, which are also from that same Dear Lizzie collection, and they're called Soiree, and that's a foam letter with glitter on top, I think. And the sticker sheet as well. Okay, so I think that should be plenty. I do want a little bit of pattern paper to lay behind this, but I liked how, if I put this down before I get anything else, I liked the mix of this card with this particular pattern paper, nice neutral that goes well with the wood veneer color, and then I was able to repeat that polka dot in aqua. I want to create a pretty quick and easy background with plenty of layers, so I've cut boxes from a variety of older Dear Lizzie papers that were scraps, where I'd use part of the sheet but not the whole thing, and just inked the edges with brown ink. The Dear Lizzie collections, although each individual collection does have its own color scheme, they all tend to work really well together because they're similar color schemes, even though they're a little bit different in each one. So there's some Lucky Charm and some Fifth and Frolic, but Neapolitan would also work. And plan here is to just have all of those different boxes there. I've put the adhesive a little bit in from the edge, so you can see these edges are curling up a little bit at the moment, because I want to be able to tuck some other layers in there. And then I want to include my wood veneer card and my photo strip. And just looking to see if I'd like this best as a layer underneath the papers here or above them. And what I don't want is, I don't want an edge of the pattern paper showing through that, because I like to keep the cutaway part quite clean. So I think I'll go over the pattern paper now. I'm going to try this with just my normal adhesive, and if that's not strong enough to keep it nice and flat on the page, then I'll come back with some double-sided tape. But maybe just enough. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, if while I'm making the rest of the layout it decides to release from the page, then I'll fix that, but it feels like that's all I need. I don't need anything else. I didn't add any adhesive to this more fragile part because I figured it wasn't really heavy enough to cause a problem, and it looks like it will work fine without glue there. And then my photo strip. And now comes the time of taking all these different pieces and tucking them into the layers so that I have this basic structure, but I make it a bit more exciting. So I have different little pieces that I wanted to include, and I can figure out where they will go best. And definitely want some foam squares to hand so that I can add dimension to these as I go. And I'm always looking for places where I can take the elements across multiple layers. So this floral die cut goes underneath the photo and the photo mat, but then crosses this box, and this box, and onto the different boxes printed on the pattern paper. So that will emphasize the layered effect. I didn't ink that flower, but I think there's enough in that design that it's okay without it. But the simpler shape, like this little label, seems like it would benefit from the ink around the edge to match. And just keep adding different pieces, and the stickers are a little bit smaller than the die cuts, so I can bring that in too. And just mostly looking to make sure that pieces are overlapping with different elements. That one at the bottom only overlaps with just one piece at the moment, but I want to build up more embellishment around it so that it seems more part of the whole piece. So this should bring it in a little bit. And now this makes me think, now I have all these boxes down here and I have this nice fluid floral shape, so it'd be nice if I could have a small floral down here. I've got several different floral pieces on the sticker sheet, including some floral that's in a strip, so if I wanted the combination of the floral print but something that would still be nice and orderly, I could do that too. And I'm just going to keep adding pieces around there, and then I'll be ready for my title, which I think is going to go right about here if I can use one that's short. And I like the idea of using this little box that's printed on the pattern paper to contain my journaling. Journaling all fits in this box, and I just added a couple of the stickers from the same sticker sheet to bring the different color up here, and repeated the glitter from the thicker sheet with a couple of the little stars, so that now I have 3 spots in a diagonal line that uses that same thing. And then the rest is all just little die cuts and stickers, all from the same pack, and just tucked in along the edge. And now my last finishing touch is that the wood veneer feels, although I really like it, it feels a little bit out of place at this point because everything else is paper and stickers, and then there's this one element that has a completely different texture. And I think the way to bring that all together is to add a little bit of small wood veneer into these embellishments. So I pulled out just some of the hearts. These are, I think they're an older pack from Studio Calico. But any wood veneer product, just something small where I can then dot it about the page so that the texture of this will then feel like it matches. And I could go in and add polka dots to each of these hearts as well, but I don't really think it's necessary. I'm going to leave it plain so that the polka dots remain a little bit special with that particular set. And then I'm just going to figure out a few places where these hearts can add in to all the different embellishments. And I think that will help it all pull together. You can certainly layer the wood veneer on top of the other elements. It doesn't have to go in the open space all the time. So if it's given you a little bit of trouble before when you've started to use the card and then the more you design your page, the more it feels a little bit out of place. Perhaps this is something that could help as a finishing touch. Just bringing in, rather have a heart that's a different shape there, and bringing in a little bit more of that same texture by using some wood veneer pieces or one of the 2x2 cards, something that would give you the idea that that texture repeats, and then it should feel a bit less out of place. Got a little gap in the writing there, and I think this above the title there is a good spot for the larger heart here. But there's no particularly magic way to space these. It's just how you, wherever you see a spot that you think might benefit from that little bit of extra. I don't think I need to bring anything over here because I already have the wood veneer card. Yeah, I think that looks too out of place over there. And on this side, I think then that heart just looks more like an arrow than a heart shape. So better to scatter it around somewhere else and maybe just bring it right up to this top corner to fill in that line of embellishments that goes roughly across the page. So there is my finished layout for this week, and your challenge is to use wood veneer. Now, if you have any of the 3x4 or 2x2 cards from 2Ps, then please consider it your challenge to use at least one of those and try something. It can be just gluing it to the page, or it can be any sort of technique using all sorts of different supplies, completely up to you. If you don't have any of those in your stash, you're still welcome to play along with this week's challenge and just use wood veneer of any brand, any style, so it could be even these sort of small pieces, and create a page with those. If you just have lots of these and are looking for ideas, there is an earlier adventure called Wood Veneer Wonders that's just about those little tiny pieces that has a little bit of a different slant on using them, so you can go back and reference that. But one way or the other, we hope that this week we'll see a little wood veneer in the gallery, and I hope you'll share your work with us. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Join us next week for the continuing adventures of Glitter Girl and the ongoing mystery of the scrapbooker behind the mask at 2psinabucket.com.